Man, I'm having trouble writing this.
What do you mean? Just be honest like you always do.
I mean, yeah, I just don't want, people to think I'm shitting on it unnecessarily.
I mean, look, you didn't pull your punches when you were talking about good times. So don't do it now. People tune in because you're honest.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Stick to that. Do what you do.
For the Vault 319 recording room, this is the Twee'Quel podcast.
Who are you talking to?
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Alexander, the voice in the void, the lone wolf, your favorite host with a lisp. Happy Saturday to you, and welcome to another episode of the Twee'Quel podcast. I'm so happy to see you. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. It's been a very good week for me. I hope it's been a good week for you. The sun's been shining. It's been a little cool at night, but you know what? That's okay. It's late spring. We're going into the summer, and I think the weather's going to be pretty good to us this year. It won't be too many thunderstorms, and it won't be actually cool all summer long. It's going to be hot next week, so it's actually really good. So I hope you get a chance to get out there and enjoy the weather like I'm going to get out there and enjoy it. Like I said, it's been a good week. I actually got to see Fall Guy before, and we're going to actually talk about that today, but not just talk about the movie. We're actually going to talk about the series, how it connects, and actually talking about Fall Guy, it's actually going to encapsulate exactly what's going on with the industry as a whole right now, because it's kind of down, but we're going to talk about that later. We ain't going to get into that right now. We're not going to talk about Back to Black or Furiosa this week. Furiosa will be next week. I haven't got a chance to see Back to Black yet, which kind of is, kind of sad. They actually took it out of the theater already. So if that's happened near you, let me know. So that means it's going to be on digital at some point within the next week or so. And then I'll watch it and we'll talk about it. Like I said, I'm really interested in seeing it. I want to see the Amy Winehouse story. She's a fantastic artist, but that's a whole different topic of conversation. We'll get to that at a later date. But yeah, today we're going to talk about Fall Guy, the series. We're going to talk about we're going to talk about the series, the film, and we're going to talk about how it relates to everything going on within the industry as a whole. But before we get into any of that, let's talk about the news. So let's start the news off today by talking about the legacy of Bill Walton. Now, the NBA and college great passed away on the 27th after a prolonged battle of cancer that he had talked about extensively. The man was an absolute legend in the game of basketball, not just pro, but also college. He won 2 championships at UCLA under the legendary coach John Wooden. And when he made it to the NBA, he was drafted by the Portland Trail Blazers, winning an NBA championship and winning Finals MVP that exact same year. And later on in his career, he would move over to the Boston Celtics and win a championship with them. So 2 in the college, 2 in pros. Fantastic player. He was plagued by injuries, and he did not ever live up to the amount of potential that he possibly could have had, because he was dogged so much by injuries. And everybody says that if he had not been dogged by those injuries, he would probably be considered either number 1, number 2, maybe even number 3 of all time for centers in the NBA. After his career in the NBA ended, he would go on to be an analyst and sportscaster for the NBA, working with likes of ESPN and ABC and a handful of others. When he passed on the 27th, Bill Walton was 71 years old. At the box office, Mad Max Furiosa took the number 1 spot, taking home worldwide $65.1 million. A great start for it. Number 2, the Garfield movie, oddly enough, and so far it's brought in $97.5 million worldwide. And number 3, If, hanging on, adding another $22.3 million to its total. It is now up over just about $105 million worldwide total. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has finally crossed $300 million worldwide. That is a fantastic number. It's a really good movie. I had a lot of fun watching it. New this week, we don't really have anything all that much that we want to talk about that I'm going to go see. Like I said before, we are going to review Back to Black as soon as I see it, and we are going to review Mad Max Furiosa at a later date. Earlier this week, we got a poster and a trailer for Moana 2. So they are getting the same cast back together. So once you hear Maui, it is going to be Dwayne the Rock Johnson. So all the familiar voices from the older movie will be in this one. Moana, obviously they've aged her up. She's obviously older for this film. The trailer looks okay to me. I don't think it actually looks or feels as if it fits the older film to this one. For some odd reason, it just kind of looks wonky. The CGI for it is kind of a little off, but it does look okay. I don't know if the movie's going to be any good. we'll see when it comes out. The poster does look interesting. It's basically just Maui's hook. So obviously not so much where Moana was the center of the last movie. I don't think she's really going to be the center of this movie. I think it's going to be more Maui being the center of it for whatever reason. If you remember Lion King 2, it wasn't nowhere near as good as the first one. I think we're going to have that same type of problem with this, but we shall see. And when it comes out, we'll talk about it. If you are a baseball fan, you probably already know about this, but if you're not, then this is going to be news to you. Major League Baseball has decided to take all of these stats and the records from the Negro Leagues and their entire history and merge it into the major leagues, and all of those records will now be merged. There is a lot to talk about with that. I don't want to go into it right here in the news segment, because I have an entire segment to tell you why as much as it is a good idea to do it, there's a reason why I don't want them to actually do this, but we'll talk about that in the next segment. So we already knew that Giancarlo Esposito was joining the MCU, well, now we know where his first appearance will be. It will be in Captain America Brave New World. Now they are being completely tight-lipped about who he's actually playing. They still haven't given us any type of inkling as to who he will be playing. But he has said that, hey, I don't want to particularly play a character that's already been played or replace somebody. So that basically throws Kang out of the window, right? So he says he wants somebody that's fresh, somebody new, and that's who he'll be playing. He basically gave us a hint, but he didn't actually tell us. So he's going to show up in that one. The only thing that we have been given directly to whatever he's playing from Disney is that his role will be villainous. So a lot of people are expecting him to, in some way, shape, or form, be Mephisto, right? To me, I don't see that actually happening. There are two names that I think he could actually fit going forward, starting with his role in whoever it's going to be in Brave New World. And those two names are Henry Gyrick and William Stryker. Now, if you think that those are far-fetched, listen to me when I tell you this. Henry Gyrick in the comics, never mind what we got from X-Men 97. In the comics, he is a threat, a consistent threat and a consistent problem, not just to Mutantdom and the X-Men, but to the Avengers as well, almost consistently in his entire run. Now, William Stryker, that from what we've seen in the movies, is not the William Stryker from the comics. He is not a military guy like we've seen from the X-Men movies and other things. In the comics, he is a religious zealot. The man killed his entire family, right, when he found out that his son or one of his children was a mutant. And he killed them and then turned into this religious zealot that just wants all mutants wiped out. Those two, to me, those are characters that Giancarlo Esposito can bring to life heavily. I mean, these are human characters with very real life type of threats, right? And I think inside of the MCU, that is what they need right now. They need more real life threats. They don't need comic book threats and superheroes and robots and, AI and things like that. They need humans that are consistent problems to people that have powers. Henry Gyrick and William Stryker will fit it perfectly, but we shall see. Next year, February is still the due date. They are shooting more scenes for Captain America Brave New World right now and rejigging the film, most likely to have Giancarlo Esposito show up in it and do extra scenes for the film. But it is still being said that the movie will debut next year, 2025, in February, and I cannot wait till that film shows up. If you are a fan of Batman Ninja, then I guess you probably already know, but for those who don't, Batman Ninja 2, it is actually happening right now. It's in development. There is no timeline for them to when it will actually show up. I'm going to guess we're not going to get it until 2025, probably sometime in April or May. That'll give them time to get it done and make it look nice and make it look pretty. But the fact that they're doing a part 2 says a lot. I'm glad DC is actually going to do more things outside of just doing the movies, right? They concentrated for so long on movies that they forgot that their bread and butter was the animated things and some of the video games. So I'm glad that they're shifting some of the weight away from the films and doing other type of media. DC, just keep doing your thing. I trust James Gunn. I trust Peter Safran. And if you're going to do more animated things and more video games, you got my vote. So this is Sparta. At least we all know what that call is from. So the 300 movie is now getting a TV series, or at least one is in development. So the original 300, the IP was not a film. The original was a comic book by Frank Miller that got turned into the film. So now that film is being turned into a television series that's most likely is going to follow the same storyline from the original movie and just turn it into a series. Either way, it is going to get a series, and I don't know how the series would actually work, right? Especially if you're going to do the exact same timeline or exact same events from the film. But if they are going to do that, I would still actually watch it, because I would actually like to see that more drawn out, to see more in depth for each of the particular people within the group of 300, right? You know, more interesting and more humanized stories within that. I love the movie. I actually loved part 2. Most people didn't, but I actually thought it was a really good film. So if they're going to do a series for it, I would actually like to see it. There has been no word whatsoever about release dates or time for production, but most likely we're not going to see it until 2025. But either way, when it comes out, we will be talking about it. So mark your calendars, July 2nd, 2025. I know that doesn't seem like much time away for a new Jurassic Park film, but that is the release date for Jurassic World 4. Now, they are saying that it's not a direct sequel to Jurassic World Dominion, which we just got not too long ago, but they said it's supposed to be a start of a new era for the Jurassic Park franchise. I don't know how it's going to work, but hey, if we get more dinosaurs, I'm not arguing. I love dinosaurs. I go back to the original Jurassic Park. It still holds up to this day. That original film, and all of the films still hold up. Even if you don't like all of them, or even if you don't think they're all just top tier, they still all hold up visually. The story still hold up. Jurassic World Dominion was a tiny bit of a letdown for me, but I still love the movie very much. I know my kids are going to be happy. They are complete Jurassic Park fiends, and they just can't get enough of them. But yeah, July 2nd next year, 2025, the new film will come out, and that's just barely over a year away. So they got a lot of work to do. Stephen King is Richard Bachman. Richard Bachman is Stephen King, and if you are a fan of either one of those names, you know that for a fact, but this part you probably don't know. So while Stephen King was writing in his early days, he didn't use his real name. He went by the name Richard Bachman, which is where you get some of the things like Running Man, right? He wrote that under his pseudonym, Richard Bachman. Well, another one of those novels that he wrote under that pseudonym, The Long Walk, is now going to be turned into a feature film. It has been decades, and I mean multiple decades, almost 30 years since Stephen King has tried to get that particular book turned into a film, and it's finally now in early production going on. They are writing the script. They are getting everything together. The film itself is set. The film itself is just like the story. It will be set in a dystopian future where the biggest entertainment is basically this marathon goes cross country, and they all once a year they get 100 boys together, and they tell them, now you got to walk and you got to keep up. I think the pace was 3 or 4 miles per hour, and you can't stop. And if you slow down for too long, then they gun you down, and the last one wins a pile of money and any one wish that he wants. So the book is going to follow. The movie itself is going to follow exactly like the book. And the fact that we're doing this, I can't wait to see it. It is one of my absolute favorite Stephen King novels. And like I said, it's been almost 30 years since he's been trying to get this particular book turned into a film. And now that it's in pre-production, cross your fingers that we get it sometime, probably most likely 2025. Films are always going to take a little longer to do now, especially after the strikes. So if we get it anytime sooner, I will keep track of it and I'll let you know. So we're going to end our news today talking about Jeremy Renner. Now, if you don't remember, Jeremy Renner actually had that horrific accident with the snowplow last year, 2023 in January. And he went through a long recovery, but now he's back to acting. He's back in the game. You can catch him right now on Paramount Plus on Mayor of Kingstown. But he has said over the past week that he would like to go back to the Mission Impossible series and take on his character, William Brandt, once again. Now, he was in 2 movies, 2011 and 2025, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, respectively. And he was in both of those films, and he was actually supposed to be a character that steps up and to take over the franchise after Tom Cruise's character takes out. but Jeremy Renner was hurt, and he stepped away from the role in the first place because he decided, you know what, it's taking a lot of time away from me being a dad, and I need to go do that first. So he stepped away from the role. The series kept going. We just had a Mission Impossible film, not the best one out of the bunch, but still a really good film. If you haven't seen it, watch it. So he's now said that now that his children are older and he feels like he can step back into doing acting full time, he would like to go back to that role. And I, for one, think he can absolutely take over. Not so much take over as William, as Ethan Hunt. Nobody wants to see him do that. But as William Brandt, I can see him being the main spy, the main guy overall with the IMF team, right inside of the Mission Impossible series. That would actually be really good. We've seen him do this before, and he inside of the Bourne Identity franchise, he was actually one of the people that was brainwashed and turned into a killer, just like Jason Bourne was. And he was in he had his own Jason Bourne-esque movie where he took over as the lead role. A lot of people like poo-pooed it because it wasn't Jason Bourne, it wasn't the original character. But if you watch the film itself and watch him, he was really good in it. So if you have that type of situation again, to me, and where he steps up and becomes the main guy inside of the Mission Impossible series, I think it could work. We are getting a new Mission Impossible movie next year, oddly enough, and the one particular director that has taken over for the franchise, what is his name? Christopher McQuarrie. He has said that beyond the movie next year, they are trying to work out newer films after that one. So I can see Tom Cruise step away, becomes the producer or the executive producer, even the director for the Mission Impossible series, and Jeremy Renner will star as William Brandt and take over the IMF team. I can see that actually happening, and I, for one, I honestly believe it will be excellent. And I'm happy to see that Jeremy Renner is doing better and is back to acting full time. That accident, and if you didn't see everything that happened to him, look up some of his older posts, because he did keep track of everything that happened to him after the accident and how bad it actually got. You're talking about 30 broken bones, collapsed lung, the entire works. So the fact that he's up and breathing and has full function, there is a God. If you don't believe, I believe. That's all the news for today. Don't forget to check on the Instagram page at @the_Twee'Quel_pod. And if you want to see that trailer for Moana, it is over there. It is up and playing. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about baseball for a second. Sports and politics don't usually come up on this podcast. Just two things that we really don't talk about very often. But if you could indulge me for a moment and walk with me on this path, I'll explain it as best I can. So, as I mentioned in the news earlier, Major League Baseball is going to take all of the Negro League stats, meld them in with everything that happened in the MLB in its entirety, in its entire history, and those stats will stand as permanent records. Now, most people who have no idea about what's going on with baseball, a lot of those records are going to be owned primarily by now Black players. The Negro League's had 2,300 plus players, 3 women over its history. And a lot of those records are far and above anything that has ever been produced in Major League Baseball. Now, that in itself is going to cause such a backlash. You can almost see it coming, like a tidal wave rolling up on the beach. But besides that, really, to me, it's a washing of history and an erasure of history that I fear is going to be the biggest thing that I don't want to see happen. Never mind a hitter like Josh Gibson, who had 1,000+ home runs. He's going to own that. He's going to own batting average. He's going to own a slugging percentage. All the big solo one-man records that you can possibly have for baseball, it's going to be owned by him and maybe 1 or 2 other players. Never mind all the record books. To me, it's about the history of what the Negro League is and stood for that I fear will be erased from history altogether, and I don't want that to happen. See, growing up in Detroit, baseball was at one point my absolute favorite sport. It's the sport that everybody played. It was so easy to get into. All you needed was a stick and a tennis ball, and you can play it at any point, anywhere. My childhood, honestly, if you ever seen the movie Sandlot, was that. Maybe we'll add that to our weekend watch list, but it's a different story. But baseball was such an easy sport to get into and so much fun when we were a kid. And then strikes happened and other things happened and baseball faded into the background. Now my all-time favorite sport is hockey and the number one sport in the country is football when it was baseball at one point. But again, that history of it is what's most important. See, Major League Baseball readily will tell you that at one point it was openly hostile toward black players, did not want them in the league, kept them out as long as they could before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. And then came along other players from the Negro Leagues like Satchel Paige, who at 50 and almost 60 years old was a rookie in Major League Baseball and still took to the mound and was regularly striking out Major League hitters. And even while the Negro League was going on and the two leagues were separate, Negro League players and their teams would readily play Major League Baseball players, play their teams left and right, and would beat them handily almost every single time they played. There's a history to that cannot be erased and should not be erased. Because if you move those records from the Negro Leagues into Major League Baseball, then it's almost as if Major League Baseball is saying, well, that separation never happened. Because see, here's the records. They stand. Negro League Baseball doesn't need to be talked about anymore. Then what happens? Then the fact that we honor Negro League Baseballs, not only in this city, but around the major leagues, then are they not going to have those days anymore? Do we unretire Jackie Robinson's number across the league? Do people go back to using it? You might look at me and say, well, those things are crazy. They wouldn't actually do that. Well, yeah, they actually might. You can't underestimate the power of erasing history and rewriting a story. Because, see, the Negro Leagues only existed because black players were kept out of Major League. Those men and those few women, they barnstormed, formed their own teams, found their way from one city to another to play baseball, just to play baseball. They did it in the face of prejudice and hatred and death threats. Let's not forget that either. I am all for honoring every single thing that the Negro League did and everything it did for people who look like me and grew up loving the sport of baseball. I have a jacket with every Negro League team that ever existed on it. I bought that jacket because I knew the history of it. I don't wear it because I don't want it to get tore up. Hopefully in one day I can pass it down to one of my kids. I can tell them the story of men like Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige and let them know that, hey, there was a point when people who looked like us couldn't play in the major leagues. But we didn't get down on ourselves. We didn't get angry. We got smart. We got creative. We came up with our own league. We came up with our own teams just for the love of the game. But folding these records into the major league record books and honoring these men that way and honoring these men and women that way, it's almost the same that never happened. And I'm afraid that that might actually happen. At some point into the future, they'll say, well, there was no such thing as the Negro Leagues, because how could it be when look at all these men and women? Because there were women, a few, in Negro Leagues. Look at all these men and women in our record book. So how could that ever be a thing? And then they erase the history that made this country what it is. I don't want them to omit history as a way of saying, well, we're making everything right. No, keep the history. Honor what these men and women did, but don't change it. Because if you don't have the whole story, then the fact that Jackie Robinson had to break the color barrier, everything that he did, means absolutely nothing in the long run. And I really don't want that to happen. So I had to catch myself going to the theater to see Fall Guy. I had to consistently remind myself on the way to the theater, hey, this is not going to be like the TV show. It's not. Don't try to judge it based on the TV show. We've seen the TV show. We know we love the TV show. Don't judge it based on that. Judge it on its own merit. And honestly, I failed. I walked into that theater just knowing it was going to be a bad movie because there was no way that they could redo the original TV show. I love the original Fall Guy TV show. It was so campy, it was cheesy, it was over the top, it was weird, but it was just so much fun. I grew up in an era with shows like Fall Guy and Street Hawk and A Team, Knight Rider, shows like that. Shows that, and Saturday afternoon and then Thursday nights or whenever those shows would come on TV, I would plop down and watch them on this gigantic floor model TV. And this was the 80s when those things were super expensive. And when I say they were big, they were truly, truly big TV sets. And I would plop down and just be entertained for hours on end without interruption because it was my thing. So I walked into that movie theater just knowing this isn't going to be like the TV show and it's going to upset me and I'm not going to like it. And I was almost right because I walked into the theater and it wasn't like the TV series. Now, the movie itself is only the bare bones of what the TV series is. The Fall Guy movie is just the name and the basic concept of the TV show. We have Coach Severs, who is a stuntman and winds up in some sort of mystery that has to get solved, and he's going to wind up being the hero. That was pretty much it from the movie. Everything else from the TV series is stripped away, and instead of it being an action comedy like the TV series, we get a romantic comedy inside of the film. Now, I wasn't totally against it, but I also felt like stripping all of those things away, it would wind up losing the magic that I got from watching the TV series. And in truth, that's what happened. I didn't like it right off the bat because, again, I failed. I told myself not to think of it as the TV series, think of it as its own thing, and judge it based on that. And I didn't. At first, it not being an action comedy and being a romantic comedy, I come to figure out that, for the film, not for the series, but for the film, this new film, it actually works. Ryan Gosling as Coach Severs is in no way, shape, or form up to the same level as Lee Majors as Coach Severs. But these are two different characters. Now, the series itself has Coach Severs being a stuntman who is consistently looking for extra cash because he has a truck payment, he has a house payment. This is the 80s. Everything is very expensive, especially out in LA, just like it is now. He's a normal guy, so he does what he can working, the only craft that he's really good at is being a stuntman, but it doesn't pay all the bills. So he winds up with a friend, Terry McMichaels, who gets him jobs because she's a bail bondsman to go and get these people who jump bail. And she pays him really well for it. And along the way, he drags his good friend Howie, who he trained to be a stuntman, and Jody, who he also trained her to be a stunt woman. And they all wind up being friends and doing these jobs together for extra cash. And they hang out together. And they're basically this small little nuclear family. Found family, but family nonetheless. That is nothing like the film. In the film, we get Ryan Gosling playing Coach Severs, who is in love with a woman who was at one point a stunt coordinator and winds up being a director. And after breaking his back and leaving the industry, he tries to wow back into her life after getting invited back to the set to take on another stunt role after being gone for so long. And then things happen and he winds up inside of a mystery after people think he has something to do with the disappearance of the man he used to be the stunt double for on pretty much all of that guy's films, Tom Ryder. Now, it's a good story. Don't get me wrong. If you watch the movie as it is and just judge it based on its own merit, it is actually a really fun film. It's a summer movie. I've always said summer movies don't have to have some overarching message. It doesn't have to make you feel and make you want to run out there and save the world. Most often, summer movies are just meant to be stupid, mindless fun. And Fall Guy is stupid, mindless fun. It's not like the series in no way, shape, or form. Like I said, it's just the name and the fact that the stuntman in it is called Coach Severs. After that, everything else diverges off into its own direction. And it's okay. I watched the series a few times over the past few weeks before I decided to talk to you today about it. And all of the magic from watching it when I was a kid came flooding back. That same 6, 7, 8 year old who sat down after and catch this show on reruns because I wasn't alive, or I was very, very, very little when the show first aired. But here I am watching this show again, and I can still have those memories of sitting on the floor watching it in front of this large floor model TV. I could still feel the carpet under my fingers and under my feet that we had in our living room. I could still hear my grandmother's feet shuffling on the floor because that show meant so much to me. It was so much fun. The fact that they had Coach Truck from the TV series in this one was also something that they drug over. But outside of those little things, everything is so much different for the film, but the film itself is still good. On its own merit, the film itself it should have had a bigger turnout. But as I was saying earlier in this episode, I realized that what happened to this film is what's happening to the movie industry as a whole. The movie industry is shying away from doing new films and, completely original concepts for films, because when those films come out, people are so confused as to what those films are going to be about that they shy away from going to see them at all. Now, it's really bad now after COVID, and most people don't even want to go back to the movie theaters because they still feel some type of way about it. And I understand that. It's completely understandable. But those films, the newer ones, the ones that are original concepts, most people are shying away from those in droves more and more. They're looking for something to grab onto, especially millennials, who are the largest population of people who are going to the movies. We rule the landscape. We are the biggest section of the population in this country and around the world, really, when you look at it. So what millennials are trying to do is we're trying to find things that reminds of us of our younger days. It makes us feel better. It brings back good memories, and it drives out all of the depression and the bad memories we have of growing up, and especially living in a world that consistently gets darker and darker every day. Movie studios know this. So they're taking older properties and trying to turn them into newer films. But the problem is taking those older properties and turning them into newer films. It's almost impossible to replicate that magic that we had as kids to now. It is almost impossible to replicate everything from the original Fall Guy into this film. Like I said, the only thing they really had was his truck, his name, and his profession. That's it. This is the only thing from the show that transforms right over into the film directly. Everything else is just them making up a new story. The magic of what made Coach Seavers in the series so much fun was that he was an everyman. He didn't have any superpowers. And yes, Lee Majors did play the Bionic Man, and he featured in the Bionic Woman. We got that. But that's completely different from what I'm talking about. Coach Seavers didn't have powers. He didn't have fancy gadgets. He didn't have, this gigantic team for backup. He was not a comic book character. He wasn't a superhero. He was literally our older brother, our uncle, our dad, some guy at our church, maybe even our school principal, somebody that we would look up to. He was everywhere, and he was just a normal person thrown into special circumstances, and he used the few tools that he had, being a stuntman, in order to get the job done. Why? Simply just to get paid. Simply just to pay for his truck, pay for his house, buy some food, just to live. He was a normal person. And that type of magic is missing in most, and I would say damn near all, modern movies. Most writers now have no idea how to write a character like that. You will see a movie here and there, and most people don't know how to write it. And most people, when they do see it and the movie does take off, they don't know how to verbalize that that's what they fell in love with about the film. Hollywood is going to have to figure out a way to recapture that type of magic if they are going to keep taking older properties and turning them into newer. Hollywood has a problem. But I believe Fall Guy is a good step in the right direction to solving that problem. And honestly, if Hollywood wants to figure out how to do it, how to recapture that old magic and to make a newer property of it, They only have to look at one film that came out, I would say about 10, 15 years ago. It was Shaft. Shaft was a 70s movie, if I'm not mistaken, late 60s, early 70s property that they decided to make into a new film. And it worked. They got a good person to act it. They got somebody who understood the property, and they got somebody to direct it. And then they got people around the star, Samuel L. Jackson playing Shaft. They even got Richard Roundtree, the original Shaft, into that one, just like they got Lee Majors and Heather Thomas into this film as for a cameo. But it worked. And if you want a absolute newer one where you can take an older property and turn it into something new, and to recapture the magic, X-Men 97. Tell me that doesn't capture the magic of the original series, but still feels fresh and new today. Hollywood has to figure out a way to do that. If and only if they are willing to do so, then they can recapture those profits that they are so desperately seeking. Because looking at everything that has come out this year, even with the success of films like Planet of the Apes, the box office is down. It is way down, and it's continued to tumble. So Hollywood, you have a problem, and you need to recapture that magic. It can be done. You just only have to look at your recent history to figure out how to do it. So that's it, and that's all. It's time for the last call. I want to thank each and every single one of you for tuning in and hanging out with me this week. You could have been doing anything in the world, but you decided to hang out with me while I do this pokey little podcast, and I truly appreciate it. I don't care if it's 1, 5, 10, 100, or 1,000 of you. I truly appreciate every single person that decides to hang out with me while I do this. I know I say that every week, and I know I say this every week, but I truly do appreciate it. It doesn't matter how many of you it is, so thank you very much. I truly appreciate it. But before we leave, let's get into our weekend watch list. It's only 2 things on the list this week, and it's an all anime weekend for me. I don't know about anybody else, but there's a lot of stuff I want to catch up on, but specifically 2 things I'm going to be watching. So our series and our animation pick are one and the same. Go, Go, Loser Ranger. So imagine if the Power Rangers met the Truman Show and gave you a dark, sort of twisted version of what's to come, and that's exactly what you have. It's going to be on Hulu, but it's also playing on Disney Plus, and if I'm not mistaken, Amazon Prime Video. You can find it almost anywhere where there's anime playing. I'm really intrigued by this series. It started back in April, and it should be still running. It's not going to be too many episodes. They only play one every Sunday, so if I'm not mistaken, they're on episode 8, which actually doesn't debut until this coming Sunday on the 2nd. So I am going to watch that. I've been meaning to get into this. It sounds like a really good show, and I think it is going to be actually really good. Now, our film pick and our nostalgia pick are one and the same. Akira. Now, I watch this film maybe 5 times a year, right along with Heavy Metal, which is my all-time favorite, but Akira is right up there. It's number 2 of my all-time favorite anime films. Such a good film. Cyberpunk, fantasy. It's anime royalty. Anybody who loves anime and have not seen this, I don't think you actually love anime as much as you say you do. But anybody who has seen it, they will tell you this is a fantastic film. If you've never seen it, please do yourself a favor, watch it. And if you have seen it, hey, watch it again, because it's always a good watch. So it's time to go. Don't forget, like we say every week, if you're feeling alone, if you feel like you need somebody to talk to, don't do anything to yourself. Don't do anything to harm anybody else. Pick up the phone, dial or text 988. There's always somebody there to talk to. You are never alone. There's always somebody to get you there through the dark times. Don't have a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That is good information. It was told to me, and believe me, it has helped me. So it's time to go, and we will end this episode the exact